Last week we saw how the Israelites came across the Red Sea, how God had divided the sea for them and they were able to cross over on dry land, and how the Egyptians, when they attempted to do so, the water came back and the Egyptians were defeated and drowned there in the Red Sea. Then chapter 15 began with the Song of Moses, a song of praise to God for the victory that he had won for Israel over the Egyptians and how God had blessed them in bringing them out of the land there. And then there was mention of the Song of Miriam as well. Miriam described as being a prophetess, she and the women who were praising God as well for their deliverance. So this evening we come to a section in the book which goes from chapter 15, verse 22 through to chapter 18 and verse 27. And this is the journey of the Israelites having crossed the Red Sea, their journey to Mount Sinai. And on the map here we can see the suggested route that they may have taken. We don't know for certain the route, but this is a route that we often find on the maps that are produced for this. So they're heading south, southeast on the other side of the Red Sea, down towards Mount Sinai at the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula. So we'll begin here in chapter 15, verse 22 to 27, which says, Then Moses led Israel onward from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them, saying, If you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give heed to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases upon you which I put upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. So, having crossed the Red Sea, the Israelites' journey continued first of all into the wilderness of Shur, which was the desert region in the northwestern part of the Sinai Peninsula between Egypt and Canaan. We have a number of other references to Shur in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 16 and verse 7, which concerns Hagar here. After she's run away from Sarah and Abraham here, the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And then in Genesis chapter 20 and verse 1, mention of Abraham's travels here. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And then in chapter 25 and verse 18, speaking of the descendants of Ishmael here, the region where they lived, they dwelt from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his people. And then a couple of references as well in First Samuel chapter 15 and verse 7, referring to Saul, one of Saul's military campaigns here. 1 Samuel 15 verse 7. Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt. So the location of Shur mentioned there as being east of Egypt. And then in chapter 27 of 1 Samuel and verse 8. 1 Samuel 27 verse 8. David, this is David here. Now, David and his men went up and made raids upon the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites, for these were the inhabitants of the land from of old as far as Shur to the land of Egypt. So it was the region there between Canaan and Egypt. But it seems that the Israelites didn't stay there in that region for too long. They continued traveling southward, and they travel for 3 days without finding any water. They came to a place called Mara, where they found some water, but it was undrinkable. Verse 23 there mentions that, and it's described, the water's described as being bitter in verse 23. When they came to Mara, they could not drink the water of Mara because it was bitter. Therefore, it was named Mara. And Mara means bitter, bitterness. That word is used in Ruth chapter 1 and verse 20 by Naomi when she returns from Moab back to her home in Bethlehem, and people refer to her as Naomi, and she says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara," because of the bitterness that she had experienced with the death of her husband and her two sons. So Ruth chapter 1 verse 20 here. She comes back to Bethlehem, and the people say, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi," which means pleasant. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." This name Mara then means bitterness or bitter. And this place was given that name Mara because of the bitter water, the bitter tasting water that was there. The bitterness may have been caused by mineral content of the water, but the lack of drinkable water led the people then to complain or to murmur against Moses, asking, "What shall we drink? What are we supposed to drink?" Their memory of what God is able to do is very short. It's just 3 days since He's brought them across the Red Sea and defeated the Egyptians. And the people had, after that event, they'd sung God's praises in that song in the earlier part of chapter 15. But here they are so quickly murmuring and complaining about the lack of water. Also, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire is constantly with them as a reminder of God's presence, and yet they still murmur. And this became a characteristic of the people throughout their time in the wilderness. And there will be many more occasions when we find them murmuring and grumbling about one thing or another. So Moses then cried out to God about the situation, and he was shown a tree. Or the word for tree here can mean a branch or a piece of wood, need not necessarily be a whole tree, but perhaps a branch or something like that. And Moses then, no doubt under the instructions of God, threw the tree or the branch into the water. And when Moses did this, the water then became sweet. So the incident then provided an object lesson in faithfulness for the people and was an occasion for their testing. Verse 25 and 26 there says, "There he proved them," or God tested them in that situation. And God promises that if the people will be obedient to his commandments and his statutes, then he will put none of the diseases upon you which I put upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Later on in Deuteronomy chapter 28, there's a reference there to the diseases of Egypt. It's reference to the plagues that God had brought upon the Egyptians, and God is promising here not to bring those upon Israel if they obey him. But Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 27 says this. This is the consequences of disobeying God. We're told here that the Lord will smite you with the boils of Egypt and with the ulcers and the scurvy and the itch of which you cannot be healed. and then in verses 60 and 61 of that chapter as well. He will bring upon you again all the diseases of Egypt, which you are afraid of, and they shall cleave to you. Every sickness also and every affliction which is not recorded in the book of this law, the Lord will bring upon you until you are destroyed. So there's the warning that comes later in Deuteronomy there, that if they are disobedient, then they would suffer those diseases of Egypt. But here God promises that if they obey him, he will not put upon them those diseases. And he says, "For I am the Lord your healer." So just as God had healed the water, made it drinkable, so he will heal his people if they will obey him. There's another miracle similar to this with uh, turning undrinkable water into drinkable water, which is performed by the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings, in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 19 to 22, which says, "Now the men of the city said to Elisha, Behold, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad, and the land is unfruitful." He said, "Bring me a new bowl and put salt in it." So they brought it to him. Then he went to the spring of water and threw salt in it, and said, "Thus says the Lord, I have made this water wholesome, hence neither death nor miscarriage shall come from it." So the water has been wholesome to this day, according to the word which Elisha spoke. So on this occasion, Elisha throws salt into this water, and it then becomes drinkable. And of course, this, as we were talking about earlier, is something in the news, the water in Tunbridge Wells. So perhaps someone needs to go and put some salt in it, or tree, so to help them out there. So this then is God's provision for Israel in providing them with this drinkable water. So the journey then continues. Verse 27, the last verse of Exodus chapter 15 says, "Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water." So they continue on to Elim, and Elim means terebinths or oaks, and it's noted here that there were 12 springs of water, so plentiful supply of water for them now, and 70 palm trees. And that's another little detail that's recorded there, which would have been noted by someone who had been there and seen how many springs of water and how many trees there were. So an indication of an eyewitness account of that. So the people now encamp there by that water. They move on from there, though, as we go into chapter 16, verses 1 to 3. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So they move on from Elim and they come into the wilderness of Sin, which is the location given there between Elim and Sinai. And it's noted that it is now the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from Egypt. So this is now 1 month after leaving Egypt. They'd left Egypt on the night of the 14th day of the first month. And now we're at the 15th day of the second month. So 1 month has passed. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel now murmured again, complained against Moses and Aaron. And they say that they would have preferred to have died in Egypt, where they had food, rather than to die of hunger in the wilderness. So complaining about the lack of food now. So although they had been in slavery in Egypt, it seems that they didn't suffer from any shortage of food whilst they were there, and they remembered the meat and the bread that they had eaten there in Egypt. There's another reference in Numbers chapter 11, verses 4 and 5, to the food that they had enjoyed in Egypt. This is on a later occasion in the journey when again they're complaining about the lack of food. Numbers chapter 11, verses 4 and 5 says, Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. So they're remembering all the good food that they had enjoyed whilst they were in Egypt. Forgetting, of course, the oppression and the hardship that they had to live under in whilst they were in Egypt. Just remembering those good things. It's a bit like today when people talk about the good old days. Remember the good old days and all the things we used to do back then, and our minds are sort of blot out the bad things that happen, and the past always seems so much better than the present. So here they're complaining again to Moses, and they blame Moses and Aaron for their predicament, even suggesting that they have deliberately brought them out into the wilderness in order to kill them. So we'll read on here in chapter 16, verses 4 to 12. It goes on to say this. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your murmurings against the Lord. For what are we that you murmur against us? And Moses said, When the Lord gives you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your murmurings which you murmur against him, what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your murmurings. And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the murmurings of the people of Israel. Say to them, At twilight you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So, in response to the murmuring of the people, then the Lord promises to rain bread from heaven for the people. And the people are to gather a portion each day. And God will do this to prove them or to test them to see whether they will walk in God's law or not. So the people will become dependent upon God on a daily basis. And then, in anticipation of the law regarding the Sabbath, the people are to gather twice as much on the sixth day, so they won't have to gather any on the seventh day. So Moses and Aaron then address the congregation. At evening, the people will know that it is the Lord who has brought them out of Egypt. They had said earlier that it was Moses and Aaron who had brought them out. Well, yes, Moses and Aaron had led them out, but it was God who was bringing that about. And in the morning they shall see the glory of the Lord. So God's glory will be demonstrated through his actions, which will take place here. Moses says that they have not murmured against him and Aaron, but they've been murmuring against the Lord. And the Lord will give them meat in the evening and bread in the morning. So as Aaron spoke to the congregation, then the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud, reminder of God's presence with them. And then God's words are repeated concerning the provision that he's going to make for them of the flesh and the bread. And so by this they will know that he is the Lord. Well, reading on verse 13 to 21, the account goes on. In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, dew lay round about the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine, flake-like thing, fine as hoarfrost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man of you as much as he can eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of the persons whom each of you has in his tent." And the people of Israel did so. They gathered, some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. Each gathered according to what he could eat. And Moses said to them, "Let no man leave any of it till the morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. So just as promised, then in the evening God brought quails which covered the camp. The quail is a small migratory bird which flies between Europe and Africa. And at the time of year when the Israelites would have been traveling around, the Passover time being sort of March, April time, the birds would be migrating from Africa back to Europe and would be passing over this region. And birds, if they settled on the ground, they would be easy to catch. There are pictures from Egyptian tombs, paintings of the Egyptians catching these birds in their nets. So this will be quite a common sight, really. But God is the one who is in control here, and God is the one who brings them at this particular time to provide that food for them. Just a very brief mention is made here of the quails. On another occasion, a later occasion, in Numbers chapter 11, will bring quail again, and the people on that occasion will be punished for their complaining by a plague. That's in Numbers chapter 11. But here the main interest is in the bread rather than the quail. So in the morning, after the dew had lifted, there was on the face of the wilderness this fine flake-like thing, fine as hoarfrost on the ground. A description of this is given as well in Numbers chapter 11 from that later occasion, Numbers chapter 11, verse 7 to 9. Which says, "Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it, and ground it in mills, or beat it in mortars, and boiled it in pots, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it." As I mentioned there of how the people used it in their cooking, uh, probably produced a cookery book of 100 ways to cook with manna or something like that. So this was the provision that God made for them. On seeing it for the first time, the people didn't know what it was. They asked, "What is it?" And the Hebrew phrase for their question here is manhu, from which the name manna comes. So manna just means, what is it? Moses tells the people it is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. Some references in the Psalms to manna as well. In Psalm 78, Psalm 78, verse 23. Well, the earlier verses speak there of God raining down upon them manna to eat, gave them the grain of heaven. Well, verse 23 says, Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven, and he rained down upon them manna to eat, and gave them the grain of heaven. Man ate of the bread of the angels, he sent them food in abundance. So it's described there as the grain of heaven and the bread of the angels. And then in Psalm 105, verse 40, mention of the quail here as well. They asked, and he brought quails and gave them bread from heaven in abundance. Again, they're described as bread from heaven. The Lord had commanded that the people should gather an omer apiece according to the number of persons whom each of you has in his tent. So if there were 5 people in a tent, they would gather 5 omers of this manna. It's uncertain what an omer would be in our measurements today. In verse 36 of chapter 16, we're told that an omer is the 10th part of an ephah, and it's thought that an ephah is around 5 gallons or 23 liters. So an omer is perhaps around 2 liters or 4 pints, something like that. So it's a rough approximation to our own measurements here. So when the people gathered it, some of them gathered more and some gathered less. But when it was all measured out, divided out, they all had an omer each. So the discrepancies were evened out in that way. Paul quotes this verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 15, in the passage where he's encouraging the Corinthians to participate in giving to help relieve the poor brethren in Judea. And in chapter 8, verse 15, well, earlier he says from verse 13, I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of equality, your abundance at the present time should supply their want. So give of your abundance to help them out, so that their abundance may supply your want, that there may be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much had nothing over, and he who gathered little had no lack. So Paul is concerned about equality there, and quotes that verse to make his point there. None of the manna was to be left until the morning. It was to be used on the day it was gathered. But there were some who tried to keep some of it overnight, but the following morning they found that it had gone off. It bred worms and it became foul. Moses was angry with the people because they had disobeyed God here. So the people would go out, gather it in the morning, but by the time the sun came up and grew hot, then it had melted away. So the lesson here for them is that God is going to provide for them on a daily basis, one day at a time. So they will have to trust God for that one day. And this is really what Jesus is speaking of in the prayer that he taught the disciples in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 11. Part of the prayer there is, give us this day our daily bread. Pray for bread for that day, on a daily basis, to trust God to provide each day. And then also in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34, talking about trust and anxiety. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day. So it's like, take one day at a time, trust God today, get through today, and then tomorrow is a new day in which to trust God. Well, verses 22 to 30 now, back in Exodus 16. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers apiece. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay by to be kept till the morning." So they laid it by till the morning, as Moses bade them, and it did not become foul, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain every man of you in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. And the manna was provided for 6 days, and on the sixth day, twice as much was provided, so that none would be gathered on the seventh day. The seventh day was to be a solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. The word translated as Sabbath is Shabbat, and it means rest. So it was the seventh day was to be the Shabbat, the day of rest. And the manna that was collected on the sixth day, collecting twice as much, and which was kept over for the Sabbath, that did not become foul, as it had done on the previous occasion when some people had tried to keep some of it over for the following day. So God provided for the seventh day in that way. But still, some people went out on the Sabbath to try and collect it, and they found that there was none. So God rebuked the people once again for their disobedience here. This law here predates the giving of the Ten Commandments and the commandment concerning the Sabbath, which we come to in Exodus chapter 20. So the idea of having a seventh day as a day of rest, though, goes back to the creation itself and to God resting on the seventh day. So Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3 there. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, so after 6 days. And on the seventh day, God finished his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all his work which he had done in creation. So that principle of resting on the seventh day goes back to the creation itself. There's no evidence that the people observed a Sabbath rest before then, before this time when the law is given in Exodus chapter 20. But here, with the gathering of the manna, it's in anticipation of that which is to come in the law there. The verses 31 to 36, then, to the end of the chapter here of Exodus 16, says, "Now the house of Israel called its name Manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. And the people of Israel ate the manna 40 years till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is the tenth part of an ephah. So the Israelites named this food manna, which, as we said earlier, just basically means what? What is it? And it's described here as being like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it being like wafers made with honey. An omer of the manna was to be kept, preserved for future generations to see what the Lord had provided for the people during their time in the wilderness. So it was a reminder of the faithfulness of God in providing for his people during this period. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 3 uh, says this, and he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but that man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. So the manna was a reminder that we don't live by bread alone, but we live by the word of the Lord. Aaron's instructed to place an omer of the manna into a jar and to place it before the Lord. And later, this would be one of the items that would be kept in the Ark of the Covenant, along with the two stone tables with the Ten Commandments on and Aaron's rod that budded. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 4 makes reference to this and to these items. The writer is describing here the tabernacle and the setup of the tabernacle. He says, behind the second curtain stood a tent called the Holy of Holies, having the golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, which contained a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's rod that budded and the tables of the covenant. So those were the three items that were placed in the Ark of the Covenant there. The golden urn holding the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, the Ten Commandments there. And God provided the people with this food, with this manna for 40 years until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And Joshua chapter 5, verses 10 to 12 records for us the ending of the provision of the manna when the people get into the land of Canaan. Joshua chapter 5, verse 10 says, when the people of Israel were encamped in Gilgal, they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month that evening in the plains of Jericho. And on the morrow after the Passover, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And the manna ceased on the morrow, when they ate of the produce of the land, and the people of Israel had manna no more, but ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So once they get into the land, then they eat the produce of the land, and God ceases to provide for them through the manna. And then the final verse of the chapter there is that explanatory note that an omer is the tenth part of an ephah. The provision of manna was something that was referred to by Jesus on the occasion of the feeding of the 5,000. After Jesus had fed the 5,000, Jesus makes reference to this when he's teaching the people an important lesson about himself being the bread of life. This is in John chapter 6, from verse 29. The first part of the chapter, Jesus feeds the 5,000, and then he comes back over the Sea of Galilee and back in Capernaum, and the people have been looking for him and wanting to speak to him. They ask him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Jesus says to them, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. And then he goes on to say, verse 29, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So they said to him, then what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. So they're challenging Jesus here to perform a sign, even though he's just fed 5,000. They want to see something better than that, and so they make reference to the manna in the wilderness. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. And then Jesus replies, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven. My Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to him, Lord, give us this bread always. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. So Jesus is pointing to himself as the greater fulfillment of that manna that God had provided for the Israelites. And he goes on to say that the provision of the manna in the wilderness was only of temporary duration. Down in verse 49, well, he repeats again in verse 48, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that a man may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever, and the bread which I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh. So Jesus is showing that he is the true bread of life, greater than the manna that God had provided at that time. And as the bread of life, then Jesus provides us with everything that we need for our spiritual well-being. He satisfies the needs of our soul. So when we face problems and difficulties in life, Jesus is the one to turn to, that he is the one who meets all of our needs. So there's that New Testament application of the story here in these words of Jesus and in his claim to be the bread of life, the one who provides life for us. Few questions to think about from this. Grumbling is a common human characteristic. Why do we grumble, and how can we stop it? Why is it hard for us to trust God to provide for us just one day at a time? And do we still need a day of rest? So a few questions there to think about from this. So we will stop here.